That way it doesn't interrupt you for the.
I know. I always start and then it says recording. Means I missed something or they missed something or.
Right.
We'll get this down one of these days. Right. What'd you say, 6 meetings, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be like really good at it in 6 meetings stuff.
Something like that.
But I already have. Between now and April.
Oh, good. Get extra practice.
6, give or take.
He's not gonna show up.
Just so you know, we do have Cindy. We also have Jeff, Chief Bertram, Sean, Shane, and Mike on Zoom.
It looked like full house. How you doing, Jeff?
Jeff and.
Good, thanks very much. How are you?
Good.
I came once while you were gone.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, I hear her recording is on, so we're gonna call this meeting to order for the Board of Trustees of the Town of Buena Vista. Can I have roll call, please?
Lacy,
Here.
trustee Fay,
Here.
trustee LaCretzi,
Here.
trustee Nyberg,
Here.
trustee Rowe,
Here.
trustee Swisher,
Here.
and trustee Bobby.
Here.
Thank you all very much. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. I remind you all, please to silence or turn off your cell phones. Next on the agenda is oath of office. We have a couple new officers joining us. Chief.
Good evening, board. We had Officer Greene and Lance McDonald recently graduated the police academy. So I'll read this statement briefly and then Paul is going to do the swearing in honors. Gentlemen, congratulations on your recent graduation from the Pikes Peak Regional Law Enforcement Academy and on passing the post exam. As you enter into the law enforcement profession, know that you bear responsibility for helping to keep our community safe, to help those in need, and that you may be called on to run toward danger, acting as that thin blue line that places you in harm's way in order to keep our citizens from harm. Know that with service of this nature, there's often an emotional cost on officers and their families. For these reasons, law enforcement is an honorable profession, and you have answered a noble call to service and sacrifice. This badge that you're wearing is a symbol of the ideals of fidelity, strength, and honor. It is a sacred trust given to you not just by me, but by the citizens of Buena Vista. There is a foundation of trust between the citizens of Buena Vista and the BVPD. And as a new officer, you must be a keeper of this trust. This trust is a part of the legacy built by former BVPD officers and leaders, as well as current members of the BVPD. This trust is bound to your duties, as referenced in our mission statement, to enforce the law in a fair and impartial manner by recognizing both statutory and judicial limitations of police authority, as well as the constitutional rights of all persons. As you take this oath, I charge you to keep the faith, that is, to serve our citizens with courage and honor, to hold sacred the trust and authority given to you by the citizens, to be mindful of the legacy built by those who came before you, and to be firm yet fair in the administration of your duties as a police officer, the town of Buena Vista.
So I'm going to swear you in at the same time, so repeat after me. Okay. I, Lance McDonald. You swear by the ever-living God that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
The Constitution of the United
the
States.
Constitution of the State of Colorado,
Constitution of the State of
the
Colorado.
laws of the State of Colorado,
The laws of the State of Colorado.
the ordinances of the town of Buena Vista,
The ordinances of the town of Buena Vista.
and will faithfully perform the duties
And faithfully perform the duties
of the office of police officer
of the office of police officer
upon which I'm about to enter
upon which I'm about to enter
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my abilities. Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Chief, you're walking a little taller.
Yay.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Paula. Next, I have a proclamation. Youth Appreciation Week. Whereas the vast majority of the youth are concerned, knowledgeable, and responsible citizens, and whereas the accomplishments and achievements of these young citizens deserve recognition and praise of their elders. And whereas Optimus International has since 1956 developed and promoted a program entitled Youth Appreciation Week. And whereas the citizens of the town of Buena Vista, Colorado, have indicated a desire to join with the Optimists, i.e. the Buena Vista Optimist Club, in expressing appreciation and approval of the contributions of the youth. Now, therefore, I, Duff Lacey, Mayor of the town of Buena Vista, do hereby proclaim the week of January 31st through February 4th, 2022 as Youth Appreciation Week in the town of Buena Vista. By this action, let it be known that we have faith in the ability of today's youth as they assume responsible roles in the future of humankind. Given under my hand the seal of the town of Buena Vista on the 11th day of January 2022. Thank you all. Next, we have the agenda adoption. Are there any questions about the agenda? Additions or deletions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Fay. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, thank you. Next is consent agenda. Questions, comments on consent agenda? Couple of resolutions there that I just wanted to point out. Just first of all, the posting of meetings for the town of Buena Vista and P&Z, where those will be located. There's no change compared to.
The only changes in the past at the post office, we posted both the Board of Trustee meetings and the public and zoning meetings. The proposed resolution has only the Board of Trustee meeting agenda being posted at the post office.
Okay.
And not the planning and zoning.
Okay, and that isn't the statutory requirement then? Okay, just the Board of Trustee meeting is. Correct. Thank you very much. Okay. Also, I'd like to recognize all of those who were reappointed to the Beautification Advisory Board. We appreciate your service very much. Also, could have walked right over that one. Water Department entering mutual aid assistance agreement. I remember Sean mentioning that. That's pretty cool. Kind of, I was going to say it was there before and was brought back now, I guess is the way to put that.
Not 100% sure how that, how we kind of fell off that list, but Sean was double checking that, and his recent efforts they put together a water emergency response plan dealing with our water system and water plant, and noticed that we were not on their list. So this is getting us back.
Getting it back on there. Very good. Any other comments, questions, trustees? I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second, Lucrezi. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item is public comment. I will remind everyone that if you are attending through Zoom, there's a Zoom chat box where you may raise your hand for acknowledgement to be recognized by the administrator. We also, if you are on by phone, you can press *9 and the host will also recognize you to speak.
Not seeing anything through chat or
I don't see anything, Philip. Okay, thank you all very much. I close public comment. Next item is staff reports. Administrator.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. When I report up here. Great. So just wanted to highlight a few upcoming dates. We're going to have a flurry of activity here in the first quarter, which we're excited about. The first thing is, unfortunately, due to a lot of COVID numbers that are not favorable throughout the county has decided to reschedule our intergovernmental meeting, which I think makes good sense. We were hoping to do that this month, but they're looking at hopefully sometime in March, so stay tuned for that. The other thing that is coming up is, as you're aware, we're working on the franchise agreement with Sangre de Cristo Electric, and we would like to get our elected officials, our boards together with staff to go over some of that content and proposals that are coming forward through that to make sure you all are comfortable with where that's going. So Paul Erickson and I are looking at the calendar. We're kind of targeting February 1st, which would be a Tuesday evening. And so that's what we're looking at. So maybe think about that and trustee staff interaction. If there's any concerns with that date, we can talk about it then. We are especially excited about upcoming work session dealing with our water policies. And that it will be the first, before the first meeting in February 8th. And we'll try to do maybe an hour and a half long work session, and we could bring some food for dinner on that evening. So that definitely will have a lot of good content, a lot of good things to discuss there. And as well, we're looking at a strategic planning session, which we typically do with the board during the spring. And this year, looking at March, I'm proposing Saturday. I think this past year we did it on a Saturday morning, and I think that worked out really well. We had a lot of good time, not distracted, not late evening kind of thing. So proposing Saturday, March 12th. Again, think about that. We won't lock it in until we have a chance to kind of hear from you all. But again, I think an opportunity for our current board to think ahead, give some direction towards staff. That's a great time for us to capture some high level thoughts and concerns and ideas from the board that help staff create the draft budget for the upcoming year. As we've done in the past several election cycles, we also invite any candidates that are running for trustee or mayor to that session as well. So a great opportunity for them to hear what's going on and get primed a little bit for what they may be dealing with not too long. So that's what I've got for things that are upcoming. And then a few highlights. One thing that has happened since our last meeting is we are under contract now for the fire station, which is very, very exciting and great timing as we're moving ahead with our new police station project. So right now, the plan, according to that agreement, is to close mid-April. And we will, once we get through the due diligence period with the buyer, we'll bring forward all the formal documents for the board to look at and consider at that time. Upcoming meeting with Boys and Girls Club. As you're all aware, they've continued to receive funding for their capital project, their facility. So looking forward to catching up with them. NES, our consultant that's helping to facilitate the master planning at the rodeo grounds in Chicago Ranch, will be conducting another public meeting January 20th. Their plan was to be here in the community center. That may still be the case, but it will at least be a hybrid setup like our board meeting so that the public can participate remotely. It may be full remote, depending on where we land on that, given the COVID situation. So, but again, we'll make sure the word gets out there and people have an opportunity to see the latest thoughts on that project and then continue to provide input. We have also entered into an agreement with Stiefel, the company that's going to help us with the certificates of participation that will help fund the new police station. They were the group, the financial group that came and presented to you all last summer. And we're excited to have them on board for that project. The decorative light replacement on Main Street is complete. Well, 99% there. We still have some concrete work to do at on a few of those lights, but for the most part, that is complete. I think it looks fantastic along Main Street, all the way towards West Main, around the library. So we're very pleased with how that turned out. Arizona Bridge, we're seeing very positive response from CDOT. So we feel like that is on schedule as we had hoped for 2022. And water, kind of tying into what's coming up water strategy wise. We are in the process of doing a water rate study, and we hope to have a draft of that prior to our work session, so you can see kind of where that's lining up and some of the options that will be coming to you in a more formal setting and in a meeting for discussion. But we think it will be good information to see going into that work session. So, and as a heads up to everyone, likely the rates will be proposed to increase, which is not a huge surprise, but there will be quite a bit of discussion and opportunity for the public to participate in that a bit too, so that there's good understanding of why rates would go up and how the various rates that we have apply to people. So that's what I've got in terms of things that have happened since the last time we met. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Philip?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
And I've attached the draft work plan for the year for operational and
I
capital.
was looking at it thinking it was last year going, wow, and we've got a lot done.
Yeah, no, that's a look at what's coming up this year.
Yep.
Just for your reference, so you can kind of see how our budget translates into projects.
Seems to me like you just shifted between December and January, you just shifted to third gear.
Just, yeah, keep going.
Let's keep going. Yeah, a lot on the table. Any questions? Thank you, Philip. Next is town treasurer. Is Michelle out there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, trustees. My report is on page 58 of the packet. Philip has it up there. I have added the links to the 2021 budget and the transparency website, and I am working to complete the published budget, which I will put the link up when that is complete, but it's required to be done by the end of January. October sales tax was received in December after we had passed the budget, but it totaled $417,000, which is 22% higher than 2020. And the graph for your viewing pleasure is attached after this. I am in the process of discussing audit with prospective auditors, and I will be getting proposals by Friday, and then I will go through them, and hopefully Libby will be so kind as to help me with that. And
Sure, just
then
let me know what you need.
I will do that. And then we'll be in high gear towards audit. I'm working on closing out the books right now. So audit season is underway. And that's everything. I have the large expenditures and the payroll data and anything you may need to ask me. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there any questions for Michelle? Comments? Do you have any data available, Michelle, let's say 10 years ago, that you could overlay on that graph that we're looking at right now? I'm not pushing,
I have,
just a question.
no, I have one that goes back to December to 2010, I believe. I can bring it up next meeting, or I can go ferret it out of the server at the building and have it for trustee staff interaction if you want.
You know, no
However-
worries. I just wanted to see how those shoulder seasons have changed. You know what I'm saying? Because I know that was always the concern. We had a peak. We always had the summer peak, summer peak, summer peak. And I know the shoulders changed, and it would just be interesting to see how much. And obviously you can look at these graphs and go, well, this year was 2021 was dramatic. But what was it 10 years ago? Just to say.
I have them all lined up, and 10 years ago compared to this year, it will knock your socks off. So do you want me to bring it forward at the next meeting?
Next meeting would be great. If you got time, like I say, it's no rush. I just think it would be very, I guess, intriguing for everybody to see just how much it's changed in 10 years. I think it'd be great.
Okay.
Next meeting would be super if you can.
I will be bringing forward also next meeting, the final budget adjustment for the year end for 2021. Truing everything up. So when people look back, it doesn't look like we were wild and crazy with the money that it actually was budgeted.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. Philip has my report. I'm going to go from the bottom up on this one because the mental wellness topic, we have a couple of guest speakers. Last night we met with the District R31 School Board. SRO Mitchell was also there, and we got to talk to them about some of the training we've been doing at the schools, as well as the standard response protocol. We really appreciate the hard work of the school board and Superintendent Yates and partnering with the police department as we conduct these trainings. The 2021 statistics are attached to the report. They're pretty interesting. You can see a nice little spike through the June, July, August months. Our officers were super busy, even though our case report numbers were down a bit. I think part of that is reflective to the fact that we were short-staffed. But other things were up. For example, citations went from 336 in 2020 to 723. And a lot of that was reflective to complaints we got about traffic in town and dangerous driving behaviors. So we listened and we went out and definitely hit traffic enforcement. DUIs were up. We had 5 between Christmas and New Year's. We also had a pursuit on Christmas Eve, and want to commend our officers for handling that. It's a dangerous situation, and it was very icy at the time. The officers made good decisions, and it's one of those, Christmas Eve stories where people are home with their families and enjoying the vacation time, and the officers are still out there working and encountering some dangerous things. So big thank you to the Chaffey County Sheriff's Office who initiated it and then also helped our officers as it ended in town with a vehicle striking a fence. We had a really nice Christmas party for the police department, and I want to thank Ben and the rec department for letting us use the community center. You can see one of our new guys there that got sworn in last time wore his kilt. They're very festive. You want to check out our police Facebook page if you get a chance. We posted a video of our tribute to Officer Stazak that we did back in October. And Tanner Brasser edited that all together and did a really good job. You can see some photos also for Shop with a Cop that we did in mid-December. It was a really great turnout, a really good time with the kids. The community was very generous. We had, I think, $200+ per kid that we were able to use to take them shopping. And they bought presents for their families and presents for themselves. And then a lot of the businesses in Salida were helpful with letting us go out to ice cream and coffee and things with the kids, get hot cocoa and things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And we've already started getting donations for Shop with the Cop next year, so that's good. As I already mentioned, the cadet graduation went really well on December 23rd. And one of the pictures there in the upper left corner, that's a training we were able to do on our field sobriety testing last week. And that's showing us fully staffed for the first time in about 2 years, which is really good. And one of the benefits of that is on Wednesdays, we're able to overlap our shifts from different sides of the week. And guys are able to come in early and we're able to train together more and get some extra training in, which is really tough when you're short staffed. So I'll jump into the mental health topic. I'm going to have our investigator, Amber Lee, come and talk to you. There's two sides to this. We wanted to talk briefly about mental wellness for the officers in the department, which is a pretty important topic. And then Mandy Keisner with Vista is also on Zoom. And when Amber and I are done, she's going to be talking to you about how the police and Vista work together. We've used them a lot lately. They've got some really cool things coming up, a new assessment center and some co-responders, which we've made pretty heavy use of the last couple months. So we're really excited about that. Regarding mental health for officers, as you look at the statistics for 2021, you see a lot of categories like burglary or assaults, death investigation, and then numbers. And I talked to Mr. Marsh with the Chaffey County Times recently, and I said, there's often a unique story behind what those numbers are. And, it might appear in the paper as so-and-so arrested for domestic violence, and that's a number. But what officers encounter on those calls can be pretty traumatic. And that stress can be compounded over the years. And recently, Investigator Lee and I were in my office talking about some things, and we started discussing a call from about 4 or 5 years ago that really bugged me. She got that call with me as we discussed it. It kind of came out that she was having some issues with that call as well. And as we talked, there were some other calls, and we kind of realized we wanted to make it a priority for the BVP to take care of our officers and their mental health. And Investigator Lee has taken a leadership role and has coordinated a lot of different things and gotten some resources for our officers, which are awesome. So I'm going to let her talk about that and give some of the statistics and things that she's compiled. And then when we're done, and after Mandy's done, we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Investigator Lee. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. So kind of introduce myself real quick. I've been with the BVPD for about 6 years now, this month, actually. My mom has been a dispatcher for 30 years in this county. And my dad was a sergeant in this county for about 15 to 20 years. So I know firsthand, not only from doing what I do for a living, but also being the daughter of people who've done this, how much this can really affect families as well as the officer themselves. So as Chief Morgan stated, this is something that I'm very passionate about. Getting ready to go for my master's degree in this specifically, and have been very focused on this since the academy. And luckily with Chief Morgan's support, as well as the former chief, I've had a lot of training with this. So I'm honored to be able to speak to you guys about this and kind of give you guys some information that we have for it. So one of the best sayings that I have, you guys can see on the slide, it says, it doesn't matter how trained you are, or how tough you are, or how seasoned you are, this can affect anybody. That in itself is very powerful. We have officers who've done this for 30 years or more, and they'll put it under their belt is, no, I'm fine, no, I'm fine, no, I'm fine. It'll get to you eventually, and it may not be something that you realize is there. So with these statistics were actually brought to my attention from one of the mental health and wellness facilities that I visited, and I've talked to several of the staff members there. They state that Colorado has roughly 50,150 first responders total for the state of Colorado. 25% of these experience some type of post-traumatic stress, whether that be job related, prior service related, or something else. So it's 25%. That's actually a larger number than most people would think. So when you break it down, first responders in average are a 1 in 3 chance of having post-traumatic stress. That's 1 in 3 versus the general public, which is 1 in 5. So me, chief, and the 2 other officers you saw here, at least one of us will have post-traumatic stress, if not all of us. 25% of those officers will experience depression. 35% of them experience some type of substance abuse issue, whether that be alcohol, drugs, or recreational something, some kind of substance abuse. Up to 95% of the officers will experience a divorce. That can add stress that's not average. And they're trying to do that while they're still trying to function and do their job. It's a huge number. From the year 2004 to the year 2020, approximately 345 first responders died by suicide of some type. So if you figure out your number, you know, like I said, there's only roughly 50,000 first responders in general in Colorado, and 345 of them were killed by their own hand, not in the line of duty. That says a lot. That number is a lot higher than it should be. And that says somewhere, in a sense, we're failing helping our officers with that stress that they're under. So 43% of those that died during that time were veterans of war. That also says something. So they're having trauma elsewhere before they become an officer to continue serving their country and or their state or whatever. And they're still carrying that stress with them, and they're adding to it. They're just compiling more and more onto it. 90% of the departments that are staffed in Colorado have less than $8,500 budgeted for mental health and wellness. So that number is significantly small if you figure the average person, you know, their career is at least 5 to 10 years. So that number, that doesn't even cover, you know, a small percentage of the people that are out there doing it. A lot of the barriers that first responders are going to seek are like, so for the officer themselves, these are some of the things that they have a really hard time facing or trying to actually come forward with asking for help or saying that they need the help. One, the cost of treatment. Sometimes that's so high that it's just intimidating for them to even think about asking for help because they can't afford it. You know, I use the example of, by technicality, I'm a single mom with 2 kids. All my money goes to taking care of my house and my kids. So sometimes it's hard to come up with those extra funds. Transportation to the clinic, us being in a rural area, that's one of the biggest problems we have here. A lot of agencies, facilities that actually help with first responders, mental health, wellness are on the range. So being able to travel and have funds to do that kind of stuff is sometimes very difficult also. Difficult getting time off of work when we were short staffed. Sometimes being able to do that was next to impossible. Just because you didn't have the time. You're constantly trying to fill shifts and make sure everybody's okay and still do what you're supposed to do. But if you're always helping everyone else, you're not always taking care of yourself too, which can create a problem later down the road. Lack of availability or of effective PTSD treatments. Again, that's where we run into the issue here in this rural area. And a lot of those do happen on the Front Range. So we're trying to get some of those services here. That's what we're looking for. The stigma associated with seeking help. More recently, we have actually come up with the stigma that's on the next slide, it says it's okay to not be okay. That is actually something that's very powerful, because it used to be, you're fine, you chose to do this, you're fine, just keep going, don't worry about it, put it under your belt, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Well, they're not fine. And somewhere they're gonna break. And that's what the stigma is associated with, that is that that's just the way it was. You chose this profession, you chose it. So stay there, just deal with it. And then fear of job repercussions is another one. If you say you have a problem and you need help, if you go to upper staff or something like that, are they going to possibly persecute you in some way, and you could lose your job because you're saying I need help? Or does it take a major action in order for you to get the help that you need, but still risk you losing your job because you just didn't feel comfortable asking for help to start with? So the next page, as you can see, again, the mantra on top, it's okay to not be okay. On this page, I have listed a couple of the facilities that are on the Front Range, the code for counseling and status code for counseling. One is in Denver, one is in Colorado Springs. Sorry, one is in Lone Tree, I guess, a suburb of Denver, but, and then the other one is in Colorado Springs. These were created by first responders for first responders. Most of their counselors are either former military and or former law enforcement, EMTs, firefighters, whatever, that have taken the training that I'm actually getting ready to go through to be able to help their other, fellow first responders and military responders to deal with their PTSD. With that, these counseling places can be both held in person, or depending on the situation, you can also have virtual conferences as well. They always want your first conference to be put in face-to-face, so you can be like, oh, I actually get to meet a person. I'm not just talking to somebody who could be God knows where. No, I actually get to meet a person. And then depending on the treatment that they feel you need, they will actually go ahead and work with you to do that part and facilitate helping you with that part. There's also two other either phone numbers or text message links on there that you can use to help get information if you are sitting at home or somewhere else that you can, text and talk to somebody, and they can also help you get a few more resources as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Mandy, can you hear us?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Wonderful. First of all, this is music to my ears. Thank you so much for having this conversation. This is such an important conversation. It's one that we've needed to have for some time, and it's so great to see this conversation happening here tonight. I really appreciate that, and thank you to Chief and Investigator Lee for queuing this conversation up. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. So I'm Mandy Keisner with Sol Vista Health. I've been here in the Valley. I moved to Buena Vista back in 2005 and started out doing quite a bit of crisis work, and just really knew that we needed to build more into community mental health programming. And I got quite an earful at the time from the chief, Tidwell. He used to say that my hair was blowing in the wind sometimes with some of our conversations. So we have come quite a long way, and I'm so thankful for the support and just patience to have us help our community build these programs that we've needed for some time. And so I wanted to talk to you briefly about some of what we have going on. One of which is a co-response program that we've launched recently that really is designed to pair a trained master's level clinician with law enforcement to respond on scene, to be able to de-escalate situations and get law enforcement back on the street, so to speak. So that program has just launched. I think we still obviously need to continue to, adjust and enhance and figure out how we best dispatch. But again, I think the communication lines are open, and we're We're doing a lot more work. As Chief had mentioned, we've been doing a lot more co-response work in Buena Vista. So that's really exciting. The other thing that it does is sometimes we have a trained peer who is a person with lived experience that is also able to come out on scene, which has been really quite useful for people experiencing a crisis to talk to someone else who's also experienced a crisis and get help and support. One of the things that was just devastating information to me with, the onset of COVID and all the, all the talk about COVID during 2020 is a conversation I had with our coroner, Jeff Graff, at the end of the year, who let me know that we had 17 deaths to suicide completion in the year of 2020 and 19 deaths. This is in Chaffee County specifically due to COVID-19. So again, if you look at the data, this is an important topic, right? Suicide prevention is something that we should be spending an equal amount of time trying to figure out how to prevent better, if you ask me. And so one of the things that our team did with that information is we applied for federal funding, and we were able to receive federal funding, which is called Project Hope. And that program has also recently launched. And that program allows us to provide intensive treatment to people who are identifying thoughts of suicide. It consists of seeing that individual up to 3 times a week. And it also provides weekly intensive treatment, at least 4 weeks and up to 6 weeks, to really target and address thoughts of despair. And again, there's so much evidence to support that. The people that we've already engaged in this program, we've already seen a lot of success. And it really gives us data too to track our success. So we do an assessment at each and every session that we hold with that. And again, that's called Project Hope. And one of the things that with this federal funding, we're very grateful to receive, but it's an adult only funded program. However, we were able to thankfully secure conversations with the state to try to launch the same program with our youth. And so again, we're going to be starting that program as well. So now it's going to be the entire spectrum from youth to adults that are going to be eligible to receive this intensive treatment service using this evidence-based program. And Philip, if it's okay, we are going to have a training session in February, and I'm happy to send that information to you about the training. But that training will actually outline this CAMS process, which is a collaborative assessment for suicide that we're using. And it really outlines in detail what the evidence-based program looks like and how to effectively talk to someone and engage someone who's experiencing thoughts of suicide. So that is a huge, just a huge relief that we're able to really focus on some suicide prevention. We're also having a community steering committee. So if anyone's interested in that, please let me know. You're welcome to join us for our steering committee to target that. And then the other thing that most people have probably heard about is our regional assessment center that's being built on the Heart of the Rockies campus here in Salida. Hopefully, we will be open for business as of mid-May, but if you've ever tried to do anything building or project related with what's been happening, sometimes things change. But again, we are on schedule actually for early completion right now. I hate to even say that out loud, but we're hoping for a grand opening to come sometime mid-May. And that will be an acute withdrawal management, a 7-bed facility, and then an acute treatment unit. So both mental health and substance use. So one of the things that we started having conversations about at least 14 years ago with law enforcement and first responders is the time it took to try to transport someone to detox or to try to transport someone to the Front Range for treatment. And then in some facilities have to go back and get the individual when they're ready to be discharged. And we really want, and we heard from law enforcement continuously over the years that we want to get them back out on the street doing what we want to have them doing for our community. And this is the hope that, 90% or higher of all the individuals that might need an acute level of care, that we'll be able to take care of these individuals within that regional assessment center and solve that problem for us. The last thing is that we are going to be asking for a letter of support. We are going to try to get a training grant federally to support more co-response training, and both for law enforcement and for our co-responders to support them in the work that they do. Again, we want to not have our law enforcement doing mental health treatment on the street. We want to make sure that that individual, if possible, is paired with a trained mental health professional and a trained officer who are able to de-escalate and hopefully try to divert any law enforcement involvement in the future. So that's sort of a brief overview of all that we have going on. Very exciting stuff, and I will turn it back over and open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Questions, comments, trustees? Go ahead, Libby.
I have a couple of questions. Are all of those beds, the 7 beds for withdrawal services, are those all in Salida? Or is Buena Vista going to have something like 1 bed?
Those are all open to anyone regionally. So we are actually, we've got a grant to purchase 2 vehicles that will help us transport people from other areas. So while the beds will actually be in Salida, the goal is to actually have it be a regional facility. So Lake County, Park County, Saguache, Fremont, and Custer County. It's supposed to be a regional hub, and the vehicles will help allow us to get people to and from that facility.
So it wouldn't just be our officers taking people down there, is that right?
No, but we will have a special bay for officers and for first responders. And the goal of that separate bay, one is for confidentiality for the person who's in crisis and has law enforcement involvement. But the other goal is to have another access point so that we can prioritize intakes on that side. And the goal is to have the officer back on the street within 15 minutes or less.
Great. That'd be a nice improvement. And then just for the Board of Trustees, in looking at the budget for 2022 and prior budgets that were handed out to us tonight, I don't see anything in there for mental health for our first responders. Is there anything available to them now? I mean, you're saying that one of the problems is the amount of money it costs them and the time away from work that it costs them. So I'm wondering if in the future we could have some amount budgeted that would allow them to
Chief, you want to, yeah, there's a few things that.
So there's some line items that are kind of generically labeled, and I think even in Craig made note that there's some areas where I said there's a cushion here for unforeseen things. So one of the things that Amber's helping us negotiate with is, for example, Code 4 counseling that she referenced. They operate based off donations. So if we needed to send an officer to Code 4 counseling, then we could take from one of those line items and give them a donation that way. But it's definitely something we're going to have, excuse me, more of an eye toward in coming years. But this year, I do believe there's enough of a cushion that we have some money we can move around if we need to.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. We've actually, we've actually utilized counseling and town paid for that for a couple of our staff. So I think it's something that, as Chief described, we actually do find ways to cover that. We prioritize that. But I think it is something that we might want to call out in the future and track separately and make sure that there's enough funds there for that.
Yeah, it just seems like if their issues are primarily service related, then it would be appropriate for the town to be, footing that bill for them.
I
Mayor,
see
if I
that.
may.
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Our health insurance has an employee assistance program, which is available to all employees. And so it's not as refined as what we would want to dedicate to our first responders. However, we have utilized the EAP program to help with some of the issues that have arisen in the past, and what is not covered by the EAP, we have covered, and I believe it's been booked to miscellaneous or other benefits.
That's right.
Thank you.
And I think, and I agree with you, Libby, and I obviously that's what we're talking about. I think if we can earmark, dedicate, make it known. That's the other thing, is make it known that it's available. That's number one. I think a lot of people don't know. The other thing, my question is the availability time-wise. And I think, Amber, you touched on it. We're short-staffed. I don't feel like I should take off and leave everybody high and dry. And it needs to be available, and I'll use the term loosely, 24/7. Because you're on duty all day long. The only time you can get off, single mom, kids, wait a minute, when am I going to go? And so it needs to be available 24/7, because you don't know when you're going to need that.
Well, and I can speak to that a little bit. So we have done great things for our officers in the fact that we work together as a team very well. And the town is very supportive of that as well. So if we need to make that time happen, we can usually adjust that. Other officers are more than willing to step in and take that spot, or help babysit or whatever else as well. And as long as you talk to Chief Morgan or the other staff, then we always help to facilitate covering shifts and stuff like that. That's one of the benefits of being where we are.
I was going to say a good closed crew works together, because to me, that's another stress. When can I go? And that just stacks on top of that one you already have. And you don't feel like you can impose. I don't want to impose again. And you don't want that feeling out there. So the easier it's available, I think, and it makes sense to me, you'll go. And people need help. And obviously, Michelle touched on that. It hasn't been just PD. There's other things that come up. A couple of years ago, we lost staff. Well, it's actually been several times we've lost staff. And that impacts the whole town staff. And that needs to be available to everybody. I think we all take for granted, you're tough guys. We just take it for granted. It's no different than military now, anything else, there's stress involved. And it adds up big time. Now, I think this is a good move in the right direction. Very good. Any other questions or comments?
I have some questions.
Yes, Devin.
Yeah, Mandy, it's really awesome to hear about the co-response program that's coming forward. I have some questions about that. So it sounds like it's just coming up. Is that going to be something that's available to our police 24/7? Is it just a 9 to 5? Because I know with mental health, it's not always 9 to 5, and holidays and weekends can be really hard for people. Just curious what your plan or goal is for that program here in Buena Vista.
Yeah, currently we have one co-responder and some time with a crisis peer. So obviously, you can easily do the math. You need more than 1 and 1 to shift an entire week 24/7. So we really are just working with Chief to determine the best hours. We've sort of, guessed, and we've started out with some hours based off of highest volume. And then we are having our crisis peers if something happens when that person's not on shift. So dispatch is also aware when the shifts are and how to contact the co-responder. But when that individual becomes in contact, if somebody's off shift, then we're having a crisis peer follow up each day post event to try to engage that individual. I would love to see it. We're calling it a pilot right now, but I would love to see more funding for co-response, and hopefully we will see that. There are starting to have some conversations at a state level about the importance of this, and if we can ever, if I ever see something really coming into a legislative action, I'm happy to pass that along to ask for you to help advocate for that to happen so that we can fund more, because it's needed. And
Yeah.
Chief, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we had a conversation, I think in early October. We got to meet the co-responders, and we've had the opportunity to work with them a couple times. And it's always unique, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, but if it's a dynamic situation where there's still a public safety threat, not calling a co-responder in at that point, because we need to make sure it's safe. So usually it's more of a static situation, a little more controlled. So having a co-responder showing up, even if it's a few minutes or even an hour after the fact, once the situation's calmed down, that in and of itself has been super, super helpful. And just to have that resource. I've been a cop up here for 21 years, and I've never had anything like that. Like they say at the police academy, police sometimes have to be mental health counselors and priests and parents and all these different roles. We're not trained for some of that level of involvement. So to have professionals to come and help us is huge.
Yeah, that's a really awesome thing. It's something that I've been thinking about for a lot of years. Since I've been on the board, I worked in social work with teens that were in extreme crisis in many different programs. So I think that's an awesome thing to bring to our community, and any support and help, whether it's a letter or funds, if that's something that you guys need to make a better program here and to support our community better. Please don't hesitate to come to us to see what we can do to help you and also help our police officers as well. So
Thank you
that's
so
awesome.
much.
Actually, I have a question because the word funding came up, and then just thinking about, because this is open to the region, the office in Salida. I think you mentioned like Lake and Fremont and Sawatch, and are you receiving funding from those groups as well? I know it's based in Chaffee down in Salida, but I was just curious if you're receiving funds and assistance from them as well.
Yeah, we are asking for any type of contribution from general donors, community donors, cities, town, anything. It's sort of a leap of faith that we're taking to build this. It's an expensive project. We have obviously been working very hard at securing as much grant funding as we can, as well as working on low interest loan to make this happen. But any level of commitment that our community can give to this project, again, it has been a collaborative project. It's been a conversation that we've been having. Again, I've been here for at least 15 years. And that's been the number one thing. We need a detox. We need acute stabilization. So yeah, we're open.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mandy, for Chief?
Yeah, I'd be interested in that community steering meeting that you was talking about. to knowing more information about that.
Could you get some of that for us, Philip?
Absolutely.
To pass that on.
Yep, do that.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Appreciate it, Devin. You know, lack of a better way, I don't know how to word it, but we appreciate everything you do. It's not simple.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Next report is Rec Director. Thank you, Mandy.
All right. Yeah, tough presentation to follow, but good to see all of you trustees virtually. Obviously, I'm not Earl, and that goes kind of right into our report. We had some staffing structure realignment in the rec department. And we are really excited about what it is going to allow us to do in 2022 and just increase our capacity and our and help spread our workload and help make our jobs a little more sustainable, not working 50+ hours a week as well. So quick rundown of that is Earl will transition to the Recreation Special Projects Manager. He's going to stay on full-time throughout January, but then he'll move into a part-time role in February. And he's going basically we are going to take our recreation director role and kind of split it. Earl's going to kind of focus on the planning and capital improvement projects, as well as working on grants and funding strategies and master planning, as well as serving as a liaison with our partner boards groups and other park and rec agencies. Obviously, if you guys don't know, my name is Shane Bassford, and I moved into the department leadership role as the recreation supervisor. I've been with town almost 5 years now, running programs, and we've had a lot of growth in our programming and in our department over that amount of time. I'm pretty excited about what we'll be able to do going forward, and to take on a little more of a leadership role in the department. We've also elevated Tucker Wilderson, who was our recreation program coordinator, or to recreation program coordinator from just a program assistant. He started part-time with us back in February, and has been an amazing addition to our team. We elevated him to full-time before the summer, and now we've elevated him into our program coordinator, recreation coordinator position, which will actually be one of 2 recreation coordinator positions here in the department. With this change, I'm not going to be the one out at programming quite as much, but Tucker will definitely be the one you'll see out there on the soccer field, and he's over at DPCA for indoor soccer tonight. And then Ben and Jenny, who we brought on board in end of 2021, are also going to continue with the department, and looking for a fun and productive year in 2022. You can see our updated department structure there. And with these transitions now, we do have an opening in the program coordinator position. The second recreation coordinator position, the job's been open since I believe it's December 21st, and today is our application deadline. We've had a lot of pretty quality candidates come in. We'll start parsing through those, throughout the rest of the week, and start scheduling interviews and try to get that person on board as soon as possible to try to, so we're still able to offer all the programming that we have scheduled for 2022. We have a good mix of local candidates and candidates with experience in the recreation field with local ties, as well as quality applicants, without ties to the area. So should be a pretty good process for us. And yeah, hopefully, we'll have a full department, sooner rather than later. Next thing we got going on in the rec department is our winter programming has begun. We have started up our adult indoor soccer leagues. We had men's start up tonight. Co-ed's going to start Thursday. We had actually just added a co-ed team today because they had some registration issues, but so we're now up to 8 teams in men's and 9 teams in co-ed, which is the most we've ever had in the adult indoor soccer league. We started open gym volleyball on Sunday. Youth indoor open gym soccer is going to start tomorrow and will be held on Wednesdays. And we've got a pretty fun offering coming up this Saturday with the Nuggets basketball, or sorry, I guess it's the Colorado Basketball Skills Challenge. Used to be the Nuggets Skills Challenge that's put on, and we are hosting a local meet as a part of the state Colorado Parking Association event. And that will be this Saturday from 9 to noon with registration at 9:30. And then the winners will move on to the sectional meet, which we are actually also going to host here in Buena Vista, where the winners from our Buena Vista meet will compete against winners from competitions in the neighboring towns. Also going to start up our youth cross country ski league by the end of the month. Always one of our most popular programs that filled up within about 36 hours of opening. We had it filled up, and hopefully we're going to try to get a few kids in off the wait list to get a few more people into that program. But almost all of our offerings this winter, January through April, are up on our website for registration as of right now. Last kind of update from the rec department is on our 2 big grant applications that Earl applied for back in, I believe it was October. One was for the Whipple Bridge and Whipple Trail to replace the decking on the bridge and then the first 1,000 feet of trail. Basically, we put in the application, they came back to us came back to us with questions about the application. And then Earl answered those questions in a presentation last week. Just kind of moving along to the next step in the process in those grants, which is good news for us. The other grant application, that grant was through Colorado Parks and Wildlife. The other grant application is through the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that is a combo. We're trying to kind of combo 2 projects with one grant, with that one with our trail development of the Walden Loop, the Tater Tots Trail kiosk, and also phase 2 and 3 of the pickleball complex. Funny enough, it's actually the same group of people that decide on both of those grants. Earl had the presentation to them last week on the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. They did ask us to try to get BB Schools on board as a co-applicant for that grant. Because the baseball field is right in the middle of our grant application. So they would like the BB Schools to be a co-applicant with us in order to move that grant process along. But BB Schools has been extremely supportive of the project. And we shouldn't have any issues getting them on as a co-applicant. And that was all I had. If you guys have any questions.
Questions for Shane? Comments?
Congrats on the new, yeah.
Like you haven't been, you know.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Next is Fire Chief Bertram.
They're here. Come on, come on.
Let's see, I didn't pull up my report. There it is.
There we go. Sorry, I had to get through pretty pictures.
Yeah, I was relying on you there. Anyways, from the inspection realm of things, we're working to get through town inspections, working geographically, be able to start hitting all the commercial occupancies. Working on that, as well as the short-term rental inspections. We're continuing with that. From the response aspect to that, candidate academies are moving forward. We did have former Vista Fire Department volunteer Corey Wheeler joined us. So we're excited to have him on board. He's finished his candidate training. He's actually responded on his first couple of fires here recently. Our newest candidate academy actually started today. So we're excited to get, we've actually got 3 candidates going through that. And we're always excited to bring new people in. We're going straight from a candidate academy. Then in February, we're going to start a hazmat operations class and then into our firefighter 1 academy, which will keep quite a few people busy through May. We're always excited for this training. Once again, is kind of like last month, and I apologize I wasn't able to make it to the meeting last month. We had our board of directors meeting the same night. But we've been we've been active in the community. We did take down Christmas Card Lane, if you notice all that disappear earlier this month. So as far as around the area, we did have some crews dedicated to go to Boulder. We ended up not getting a request to go up there, but we set some stuff aside, which is one of those things that's kind of scary for all of us when we look at what happened up there and all the houses that burned. It's an area that you wouldn't expect fires to go through. We have received quite a few questions about what we do locally to help this. And, here's some of the local projects actually that we worked on. December 14th, we went up and cut a lot of hazard trees along County Road 162. The drainage, we worked with JP County Road and Bridge and Colorado Fire Camp, got a lot of good work done up there. If any of you guys have been up Chalk Creek drainage, there's big issues with a lot of dead trees along that way. So not only from the fire perspective, but the evacuation perspective. So we were trying to help with that. Then also we've got some, our planning session's been on the way for planning the next Chafee Chips events. You guys aren't aware of that. We use our trailers, a mini excavator. We pick 4 communities throughout the year. They do mitigation work. We pick them up and haul away that slash in 3-day events. So we did dedicate to the lower portion of Game Trail. We did do that, the upper portion last year. So we're gonna be doing the lower portion in April. And by next meeting, we should be able to release the 4 communities that we're gonna do this fall. Most of the prospective ones are actually will be beneficial to town or bordering the town. Some of the communities we're looking at. So we're looking forward to announcing that in the future. Just want to run through that very briefly and open for any questions you guys may have.
Questions for Chief? And you may not know this, and I don't want to put you on the spot. How many outside departments were in assistance down in that Boulder County fire? Did you ever hear?
I never heard a final amount. Just kind of searching through social media and some of our friends to see which ones were there. There was quite a few that made it down there. They did make a request from the state to make units available. Fortunately, once we got that all mobilized, we did have weather that came in and help take care of part of that. But there was a massive amount of units, but I don't have an exact number.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Libby?
I guess I just, I wonder, Chief, whether there are any public relations or education type events that you would want to put on for us to avoid finding ourselves in that type of danger?
Yeah, and we're always looking to branch for that. We try to reach out to all the communities. We can definitely look at something locally in town as well. To see what we can do for some cleanups in the future. We've been doing a lot with Envision, and I was hoping to get it together for this report. Next month, we'll have one with some of the stuff that Envision's doing between Chafee treats and so forth. But a lot of this has been outside the community, but I'd say you're requesting for inside the town. So we'll see what we can come up with.
Cool.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Next is business items, and I believe we covered item A in the chief report. So we move right on to item B, Carbonate Street Development. The board will receive an update from staff regarding Carbonate Street development and determine project's next steps. I'm on the chief report, so let me get into here. There we go. Joseph, I had to find out who was giving us this.
Everyone, thank you all for your time and attention tonight. I'm excited to be with you and to sort of present, but really offer up discussion around a next step in this journey on developing the Carbonate Street lots. You all know that this has been a journey of a number of years so far on your part of analyzing town-owned land, identifying these two parcels, gathering community data, and then finally deciding to put out an RFP for the developer to accomplish some key desired outcomes. These desired outcomes I have listed on page 118 of your packet. And I just want to kind of start there, maybe refresh our memories on what you all want to see happen on these lots. And these were come to out of pretty robust community conversations, data gathering from employers and employees, community surveys from the Chafee Housing Authority, as well as direct input from you all. And so the three broad categories were housing, traffic, and economic development. And from those, these 5 desired outcomes were identified and prioritized of creating a minimum of 65 new housing units of various types with rents or sale prices serving households between 80 and 140% AMI. Pretty strongly identified that we do not want short-term rentals on those parcels, and that we want condominiums prohibited. The purpose there really targeting long-term rentals as well as deed restricted for sale units. We wanted preferential treatment for local employers and employees. So not simply building apartments that might be able to be leased up by folks in the Front Range that want a weekend getaway, but really trying to look at tenant selection criteria that will prioritize folks that live and work here full time. Eventually, town wants management and ownership of what is built to be turned over to the Chafee Housing Authority. You all were instrumental in helping to form that organization. You all have direct ties and accountability to how they operate and what they do. And so that felt like the most appropriate long-term structure for this development. Really wanted to see new childcare space developed to serve that 0 to 5-year-old age group. And then finally, commercial space for economic development and entrepreneurial supports. So just to recenter ourselves on those desired outcomes. As you recall, I think back in October when we first asked you for the go-ahead to issue an RFP, I presented a flow chart that sort of had many different steps. And one step along there was issuing an RFP to say, town is willing to contribute land. Who wants to build and how could that look? So we really issued an RFP, I think on November 9th, asking for development firms to submit proposals on how they would approach developing the parcels, what they wanted to do, how many units they wanted to build, how they wanted to structure a deal with the town. we heard pretty keen interest from 4 different development firms, but when it came down to it, we had 2 actually submit proposals. One that did not submit a proposal referenced their sort of short capacity at their staff level to take on the project. The other that did not submit is a pretty large developer that ended up looking at the project and thinking that it might be too small for their model. So 65 units was a bit too small for a project they wanted to commit to. That being said, though, we did get 2 proposals, 2 complete proposals, and we did interview and have conversation with both of those firms. One was called Partners, based in the Front Range, and the other was Fading West Development, which you all are probably familiar with, local developer in modular homes. Staff is recommending that we take a next step with Fading West, and some of the reasons are listed here. But I really wanted to focus first and foremost on the recommendation being a next step. As the roadmap lines out, which we'll get into in a moment, we view this as looking for a head nod or a green light to proceed with more conversation with Fading West directly. There are a lot of questions that need to be worked through and how this development could take place, what it would mean for the community, what kind of housing would get built, when, where, how big that housing is, who it serves, who owns it for how long, how it's managed, all those various questions. So what we're really seeking is that green light to pursue dedicated negotiations, for lack of a better term, with Fading West to start to answer some of those high-level questions and come back to you with terms and more details before we give a formal green light to that partnership. So to that end, I put together what I'm calling a roadmap. It's on, let's see, page 118 and 119, your packets. And it really outlines the way that staff feels the process can unfold in a way that both honors the process itself, but also gives you all as the Board of Trustees, as well as staff and community, numerous opportunities to shape how this development moves forward. We recognize that this is town-owned land. This is land that has an obligation to the residents to provide benefit. So the stakes are high. The responsibility on us, on Fading West, on you all is high. And we laid out a roadmap that we felt honored that responsibility. So the idea is that over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we would be entering into a series of conversations, conceptual negotiations, coming up with high-level term sheets for a development agreement, for how the project would approach financing, how the operations and the pro forma of that project would look, as well as what public improvements would look like, how we would approach construction timing, how we would approach community engagement, really starting to sketch out the details of all those pieces. And then we would come back to you all with those term sheets and frameworks we're proposing March 8th. Really that March 8th time is what I see as more of that needing approval for those details, needing approval for entering into an agreement with Fading West. Today is not that day. Today is a day that we're looking to get direction from you all on beginning that conversation, if that makes sense. Assuming that we can reach terms that you all are comfortable with on March 8th, we would then enter into the sort of formal conceptual designing stage, community charrettes, community meetings, design sessions, engaging dedicated stakeholders, neighbors, as well as broad community, both in person, virtually, through MyBB, using a variety of tools. And then we would come back to you with the results of that, not only in updating fashion throughout that time period, but really looking for a joint meeting with you and P&Z in July, that actually satisfies the sketch plan requirement in our code for a major subdivision. So this would be the opportunity for town to be co-creating a sketch plan with the developer, present and share that sketch plan with you all and Planning and Zoning Commission together, gather feedback, identify those key ingredients that need to stay, those key things that need to change. And from there, looking to actually turn it more fully over to the developer to begin developing preliminary plats and moving through our formal review processes forward from there. So I will pause there and welcome questions on the sort of thoughts to this stage. I also presented sort of a graphical representation of the thoughts around the model for the project as it stands now. And I offer this as a very rough starting point, not as the final product. There are many assumptions listed in here that need to get tested and will need to be fleshed out in some of these coming conversations and brought back to you for further direction.
Thank you, Joseph. Trustees, questions, comments?
I was wondering whether Urban Inc., did they respond at all when you had your RFP?
No, they didn't. And from my understanding of their model, they work almost exclusively in the low income housing tax credit space.
Yeah, lower income.
Yeah, and so we're really seeking a developer that can do what few other developers want to do, which is expressly build housing for the middle of the market without subsidies, or in this case, the only subsidy being the land. And in this case, we're providing a subsidy and then saying, in return, we need firm commitments from you on affordability and some other things. So it's really was a kind of a niche. So folks like Urban Inc. did not respond.
I have a few things, I guess, to
Yes, go ahead.
Well, first off, like, obviously want to support local. I think that's really important to have the Fading West here in our backyard. That's great. And obviously it's a lot of employees that are living here in town that would get extra work, which again is an amazing thing and totally all for that. And so this is super exciting to see them up for this potential job. As a homeowner in the farm that was produced, managed, developed by Fading West, I would not be doing my due diligence without saying I do have some concerns. And not just for myself, but other folks that do live in that community. I understand that this is just potentially a green light to move forward, which I would be on board with, assuming there will be lots of communication and transparency moving forward within a kind of like you had showed in the roadmap, especially around how we're going to handle, well, how the communication HOA is handled. You know, I think it's 75% over there, which is a little different from the normal in the state, which is about 50%. Then it's transferred over to the folks that live there. Just management with fixing anything that's broken or has an issue. What's the timing of the turnaround? Can that be handled in a timely fashion? Hitting deadlines. I know COVID has put a lot of things like totally haywire, you know, and I know a lot of developers everywhere are kind of working through things like that, but you know, we're trying to make this a speedy process to get people into these homes, which is really important. That's the whole point of this, is make sure we can get our employees and people that work here in town locally into something they can afford and enjoy and continue to have a life here in town. Affordability, you know, originally it was marketed a little different. It's a lot different now over there. I'd hope that moving forward, these really are affordable for people to get into. I understand there's costs and things come along with it, but I would really want to make sure that stays in line with our original vision, following through on promises, and also just talking about the restrictions of making sure that only locals are able to live here. full-time locals, not saying that and then having people come in that are vacationers. I do know that happens. Again, I'm not trying to, my job is to sit here and to share the stuff from constituents and the people I'm around. That is my community within this community. So yeah, so I have to put that out there. Again, I want this to work, but I have to say that, and I want us to make sure that when we do, if we do move forward, really dial it in on how this contract is planned. So thanks for listening to my soapbox.
Thank you for your input. Now, and I take what you're saying and to apply it to what you're asking. That would be in this process or after this process? That's my question.
So all the points that Trustee Lucrezi brought up, to me, they are elements that we need to, as staff, we need to make sure are represented in these term sheets that we bring back before you on March 8th. So for example, things like how is there going to be an HOA? And if so, what are the terms by which folks get to participate in decision-making? That should be a term that we're talking about with them over the coming weeks, that we're defining what is the proposal, so that when you all are looking on March 8th at this term sheet, you're able to say, yes, I believe in these terms. From there, we would then turn it over to the lawyers to translate the terms into an actual development agreement that's legally enforceable. So to me, everything that Trustee Lucrezi outlined are items for discussion over the coming weeks to come to terms that you find favorable and you find acceptable.
Because realistically, when I hear HOA fees and you have basically you're saying an 80 to 120, an HOA fee could bump it right out of that if it's too high.
So the AMI and the affordability definitions we're going to be shooting for and working to include in the deed restrictions will define affordability in terms of housing costs, which should include HOA fees.
Okay.
Right. So especially when we look at affordability as wanting to keep that 30% of your income, that 30% should include all housing costs, utilities, principal and interest, HOA fees, rent, those sorts of things.
And that's obviously where some of the other points you brought up would all be in that, also in that negotiation, the deed restrictions. Who can live there? I mean, all of that will be presented at that time in March to say, this is how, does this fit what you want to see? I guess is the best way to put it. Trustees, is this what you want to see as deed restrictions and this HOA? Does this fit? Does this make sense?
Absolutely. And I will say that there's going to be this appropriate tension that we're going to need to hold over the coming months. For example, the concept as it sits, as you remember, is the parcel on the northern side of Carbon Street is zoned MU2, which allows for pretty dense, right now, potentially 40, 50 units, plus commercial space, childcare. The parcel on the south is currently zoned R2OT, which might lend itself more towards single family homes, duplexes, potentially multifamily with a special use permit. So we don't know what the physical layout will be by March 8th. Part of that will be that physical layout, the look and feel, the density, how it's designed will be the focus of the coming months, the community process.
Right.
So what we'll be focusing on up until March 8th will be what's that relationship with Fading West? And regardless of the final numbers and configuration of units, are we comfortable with how those will get managed? Even if we don't know the exact numbers yet.
Right.
That's what we would need to gain comfort with early in the process.
Gotcha. Does that make sense? So at this point, all we're doing is giving staff authority to move forward in conversation. We aren't giving Fading West a contract.
Right.
We're giving them the authority to move forward with negotiations to come up with something that the board then approves and says, that's what we want. Then we can start talking about numbers. what we're gonna build, because that's now going to include Puget Commons, South Main. Everybody in that conversation now comes into play that says, oh, this is how we're gonna lay it out, or this makes sense, or this doesn't. After the conversation with the school, we're talking about 0 to 5-year-old, and the school is saying, well, you know, it'd be really great, you guys take the 2s and under in your daycare. That's when that comes into play, is what we're going to do then after the fact, once the legal parameters are set. And so I think that's really, and I think that's clarification. All we're doing is saying, let's move forward and talk. Now let's get legal involved. What do we want to see as trustees? Restrictions, I don't want to call them restrictions. They're not really restrictions. You can call them demands, restrictions, whatever you want to see on paper that says this is how it's going to work. And how do we hold their hand to the fire if it doesn't? I think is the best way to put it.
One more question.
Yes.
Along through that process up until March 8th, how much time do we have prior to, like, would it be just, you know, like, let's say you guys work on it and then we get it on Friday with a packet and then we have to be good to go for Tuesday, or we'll be able to have it a little bit before that? Because I do think it's a pretty big, well, it's a very big deal, but I also foresee this as we're setting kind of a roadmap in general, maybe for either future more Carbonite Street type processes potentially. I mean, I guess everything can be different, but I assume if we're going to start something like this, and there could be more of this in the future, it's kind of, I don't know, having a good plan in general. So I was kind of wondering, will we have some vision of what's going on before actually March 8th? Just for, not transparency is not the right word, but just to see how the process is going within the demand process, if you will. I don't know, lack of better words, but
I would sure hope so. And I'm gonna lean on Philip a little bit, but in my mind, let's say we have, you know, a couple conversations with them and some questions come up. Well, we may need some direction before we know how to proceed with those questions. So maybe it's staff trustee interactions at future meetings between now and March. Maybe it's an actual agenda item. I think it will probably depend. But I would definitely foresee needing more direction.
okay.
In order to get to something that's
Right.
provable, or that's you know, worthy of your time on March 8th.
We do have 3 trustee meetings between now and then that we should utilize, I think, as checkpoints along the way.
And I was going to say, that was my next comment. So let's say hypothetically, you get the approval to move forward with negotiations or whatever. We have the 3 meetings. How soon would you be able to meet with them first round? You know what I'm saying? Because we have 3 meetings. Concerns pop up. You have to digest before you can bring them to us. We could miss the next meeting, but we'd have it the first meeting in February. You know, you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to put that in perspective. Otherwise, I was going to say you have 5 minutes to look at it.
Yeah.
And you can always continue a meeting. Always say, I make a motion to continue this. And we can always keep that in mind, that if you're not comfortable with what's presented and you don't have time to digest, move it on. We can always, I mean, we know we have a timeline, that's fine, but you don't want to make the wrong step either.
Yeah.
You can always continue something.
Yeah.
Have something, Devin?
Yeah, has Fading West done anything like this before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So
Because like, I don't think they have, and I don't want to, I am uncomfortable with the idea of us being the guinea pigs for that. And, you know, with the building of the farm, I remember when we approved it, when I was on the board, what was that, like 5 years ago? I remember when they were bringing it forward, they were like, we're going to do affordable housing. We're like, great, that's awesome. And they're like, actually, it's going to be like workforce housing. It's going to be a little more, and it's going to be a little more. And then by the time it came forward, it was like, you know, it's like nurses and police officer housing. And so I want to make sure that if this is being locked in, that these are going to be affordable rental properties regardless of cost. And, you know, if, you know, I agree with supporting local and keeping it local and helping, but I want to make sure that there's some competency and professionalism that, we came up with the same questions and things when we dealt with collegiate commons and urban Inc. We're like, why are we going outside? But they actually that's their bread and butter. When urban Inc. built collegiate commons, that's what they did. So why are we going inside? What was the matrix difference between Fading West and our W Partners? Was it a huge difference? Was it close? Was it?
Yeah. So I'll try to respond to a couple of different pieces. From the start of your comments, I was actually really surprised, pleasantly so, with the presence that Fading West brought, not only in their proposal, but also to the conversation. There was full acknowledgement from their team that they are not perfect and that the farm is not perfect. And they acknowledged how when they first started with the farm, they were very resistant to deed restriction. This idea that they needed some sort of stick to reach attainability. They thought, no, well, we can do that. And now they've started to realize that what happens when that property flips? Well, now those aren't so attainable, right? And so that's the role that deed restrictions can play. And they were very open about learning that and being open to exploring that. The question of whether they've done it before, to me, has a couple of different facets. Compared to RW Partners, RW Partners is one, their proposal was not to build this for us as a partner. Their proposal was to be a fee-for-service developer if we brought all the money, and then we would own the entire project, which was not the brief in the RFP from you. It was not the brief. So it was a little bit apples to oranges, and they were not a good fit in that regard. But they also had not finished the project. Fading West has built far more units and demonstrated more success than RW Partners has. So I think there's the track record of being able to get units built and open, but then there's the other unknown of the factory. These will be units that they produce themselves. Now, thankfully, we will not be the first property that they put their units on. That will happen in the farm, that will happen up in Leadville, that will happen in Kansas City, that will happen in Gunnison by the time they get to us.
So they can work out all their cakes by the time they.
Leadville will take the. Yeah.
But I really do think that hits on a really key point in these negotiations over the coming weeks, is what are those contingencies and plan Bs, so to speak. What happens if there's an issue with their production line and they're all of a sudden 2 years behind? What do we do? We need to talk through that. We need to figure that out. We need to have provisions for that. What happens if their costs skyrocket? Well, the deed restrictions need to be set. That's what we need. So do they pull out and we go back to the drawing table? I don't know. So those are conversations that.
See, and I think that's where we weigh very heavily on our legal. Very heavily. I mean, they have sources to say, okay, this is how it's set up here. This is how it's set up here. How will it fit in our circumstance? Can we apply this? I mean, there's so many, it is so much above our head as a staff. I don't know how this works. How do you set deed restrictions on building? That's where legal comes in. That's why we have legal to take care of those things. Obviously, I see this also being a bounce off of Chafee housing. Very much so. Get Becky's input. Oh yeah, well, I've seen this work this way. I mean, that's why we are what we are. I guess best way to put it. But a good question. Very good question.
And is Fading West going to be running like the property management, like the rentals and everything else as well? Is that the plan?
Yep, the concept right now is that they would build and own the development for a set period of time to be determined in these talks. And then the Chafee Housing Authority takes over ownership and management of the rental units. there's a component of this project that may be for sale. And so obviously those will be for sale to consumers at set affordability rates that we determine. But the rental side of these will be most likely owned and managed by Fading West for 10, 15 years. We will have strict parameters around how much they need to spend on maintenance, capital reserves, so we're not taking over a derelict building, all those types of pieces over the span of that life.
Yeah, and what's their, I would just be curious to see what their proposal is for management of the facility as well. Because I don't know of any rentals that they are doing right now, because the farm is all purchased, right?
They're going to be building 77 apartments, probably breaking ground and potentially completing them this year. I'm not sure exactly.
In Leadville.
This year?
Here in the farm.
Oh, yeah, those apartments in the farm, right? Yeah, I'd be curious to see what their plan is for that versus the farm, because the farm, it's gonna be totally different with the AMI and whatnot,
Different pricing,
but similar.
but management.
But same kind of management, basically.
Yeah, they'll be managing those and those will be market rate, I assume. They're building them largely for their own workforce, so it won't be.
And you know, taking, and then I never thought about that, could fall under the same management company that would manage this. That umbrella would cover them both. That would be obviously, there again, it comes into the legal aspect of it.
What's the reasoning for them managing and running that facility for that long and not having Chaffey Housing Authority taking over it?
So some of this goes into capacity at the bare bones level. One side, the capacity of Fading West with over 100 employees is far higher to take on and complete and manage a project of this size than of the Chaffey Housing Authority with 3 staff members. So from a bare bones capacity standpoint, there's that consideration. And then the other consideration when we look at development is there's a substantial amount of risk, especially with deed restrictions, if we're as hard negotiators as we want to be, that Fading West will be taking on. They're not a charitable organization, so they need some way to recoup their investment. And so part of the way they're going to be planning on doing that is by the management over a span of time, which is, you look at Urban Inc., that's exactly what they're doing with Collegiate Commons.
Exactly the same thing.
You got a fee up front, but they're managing it for 15 years and then they'll sell it. And so it's the same model, it's just a different AMI structure.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what Fading West's plan is versus what Urban Inc. is doing, because I don't know what Urban Inc.'s management is.
Their model.
Their
basically
model, like if you rent an apartment, what's that like? Or, you know, if you're late, what happens? And, you know, like if we're catering to apartments for people that, you know, can be struggling, I don't want them being kicked out immediately, kind of thing. If I want to make sure people are being taken care of, because it's hard to live here.
Absolutely.
And after Fading with, if, you know, this, you know, obviously after Fading West would hand over and CHA would take over for management, I guess I would want to make sure that would CHA, I mean, ideally, obviously we want them to be able to manage it, that's the whole point. But I would hope that however it's left from Fading West would be, it could still continue to be managed if something went wrong, or, you know, that it would be left in a place that CHA could successfully take over. And so just making sure kind of when we get to that point, if we get to that point, it is in a state that we can, or CHA can successfully take over. I get a little concerned about where things are left, just from my personal experience.
And I guess I have to assume that would be in the agreement, you know, going through that process, because I see that's the plan. Basically, after a period of time, then Fading West sells rental properties to CHA for ownership and management. And so there would have to, again, that comes into the pre-agreement. This is how it will be left.
And not just how it's left and how we calculate the sales price, which will be determined now, but also how much do you need to spend on maintenance every year as a factor of your budget? How much needs to be set aside for capital reserves? So if something big breaks or that huge hailstorm comes through, you have enough money to replace it adequately. And then some of that also goes into building materials from the start. What is the roof made of, right? How can we make some investments now to ensure that it holds up in the long run?
Longevity.
Yeah, and there'll be a set price for when they turn it over to CHA.
There will be a set formula on how that price is determined. Obviously, if we're talking 15 years in the future, we probably won't set a dollar amount now.
But it would be a possible percentage of.
It will most likely be based on the rental revenues.
Yeah.
And that will be used as a way to determine the sale price, which is
Very good questions, by the way. This is very good.
Yeah, because I don't want, fading west in 15 years being like, well, this property is worth $200 million now, so.
Yeah.
Give us $200 million or else we keep it.
And we're nice guys. We'll take, 1.7.
Was this time frame seem legit workable to the rest of you?
Too rushed, is that what you're saying? You mean
I
the
think-
March?
To me, it's just too rushed.
To go from January to March 8th.
Yeah.
Okay, that I have to question staff on.
Yeah.
Is it feasible?
So.
And then I'll back up on Norm's side and say, is it why? Do we have to move that quick? Maybe that's what Norm's saying. Do we have to move that quick? And if we do, sure. What's the logic?
So the sort of appropriate tension that I mentioned earlier comes back to mind, because from here to March 8th, it's realistic for a term sheet. It's not realistic for a development agreement.
Right.
It's not realistic for a purchase and sale agreement. It's not realistic for a sketch plan, right? So it's realistic for more meat on the bones, but we're going to have to, and you all will have to weigh this concept of, there's still some unknowns. There's still things we need to make sure of that we're not sure of yet. And yet we also need to start gathering community input on what is this development going to be? And so to me, this whole next 6 to 8 months is the timeline to finalize everything with Fading West. Yes, March 8th will be a big milestone, but then so will July, so will August. But I think the reality is, if we look at wanting to be able to break ground in April of next year, we actually do. We have some pretty strong urgency to meet something close to this timeline.
And realistically, all we're looking for by March 8th is legal.
And
not even,
Not even legal. It's really the term sheet. It's a lot of the details you all are talking about right
the
now.
best of it is you've got 4 months to come up with meeting with the public and, coming up with the design and all that. So so the upfront part of it is what do I want to say?
The bullet points.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's the saying that we want deed restrictions to ensure, let's see, 15% of all rental units to be at 60% AMI. We want 15% to be at 80% AMI. We want, right? And then we'll be able to break that down by what does that mean actual dollar rent wise. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about for March 8th. And then we give those bullet points to the lawyers after March 8th and say, hey, can you please turn this into something legitimate?
Okay. So now that makes more sense too. Yeah, that makes more sense too. Cindy?
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, one of the comments that I wanted to make, that I do believe that the farm and Fading West have a great contribution to our community, but when they were doing the farm, and I'm going with Devin on this, on the affordable housing, it was bare minimum, no upgrades. I went on there and I designed my house and did my upgrades, and my $175,000 home turned into a $325,000 home. And so when they go in and build this, we want to make sure that we're getting upgrades and stuff in it. So it does have the potential to withstand time. Just my personal opinion.
And thank you, Cindy. And I've heard, I will say the same with Collegiate Commons, that they are not without fault. There's been problems there also. And I won't compare one to the other. I believe you are doing an unfair comparison, but I think when you try to build cheap, that's what happens.
You get cheap.
Yeah.
And I know Collegiate Commons, they had a guideline that that's what they were going to do, and this is what they were going to do, and that's how they went out. They also had some issues with follow-up.
Same.
And
I
so
don't know anything about the Collegiate Commons follow-up. I'm just, and I wasn't totally knocking. I
No,
do believe
no.
the farm and
No.
Fading West are good for our community, but we need to protect the building.
See, and I think that's where the restrictions come in, the deed restrictions, and what you're going to get bang for your buck, longevity. That's the other thing that was brought up. We want it to be sellable in 20 years and 10 years. We don't want this pile there that is worth nothing. So I think part of that, obviously, that's all in the paperwork, realistically.
And what's cool too, and this is sort of the inverse of that, why should we let them own it for 10, 15, 20 years? That also puts a very real incentive in their pockets to build a quality product from the start. And they're spending less on maintenance over that 10 to 15 years. And I do think, I've heard the quality issues with especially some of the early units in the farm. That, I mean, they have invested millions of dollars in building their own factory because of quality issues. To me, that speaks to something. And so I would expect, and we need to ensure that we feel comfortable with those quality assurances that we're getting from them.
But I'd like to point out, it's not just quality I want to focus on communication and good management, because their team is quite large now. And there's still a lot of waiting on fixes and things. Again, that's my community within this community. I'm out there every day with my dog, talking to the people of that community, so. Yes.
I could see the rental aspect of having their own rentals. They're going to have to create a management company, plain and simple. And this could fall under that umbrella of that same. That's just my thought, because they won't be able to do it in-house individually. They just won't be able to. That's not repairs. That's just management.
Right.
You still have to have people on the ground pounding nails one way or another.
I guess at the end of the day, I think this is a great thing for our community, having the carbonite street homes. And, also at the end of the day, it does fall on us to make sure we're doing everything right, that it does stand the test of time. And we're helping give people kind of essentially a good start or leg up, the ability to really get going here and be part of the community. And I want to make sure they have everything at their fingertips to have that good start. So we're setting them up for success too by choosing the right developer and making sure when we do choose the right developer, all these things are in place that it's not going to come back to haunt us later on because it happened to be convenient or we thought it would be, I really appreciate what Devin said about we don't know yet what that product is yet because it hasn't come out. I know Leadville will get the first go around. So we will see it by then, but by that point we are contracted. So we are at the mercy of whatever is happening. You know what I mean? We can't go backwards. So just lots to consider. I originally was thinking about making a motion to table this so that we could have further conversation in a work session. But after understanding a little bit more that this would just be potentially the nod to continue conversation that is not an actual contract go ahead, I decided not to bring up that motion, but I still had to share these multiple concerns because again, I would not be doing my job if I didn't, but I'm not trying to knock the farm or Fading West. It's just important to me that we get it right.
Well, when they built the farm, those were built out of state, correct?
They were.
Yes.
So
Nebraska.
them building them local, there's gonna be more They're gonna have their thumb on them more.
But better, lack of a better way to put it, they have hopefully more controls,
More
in-house controls.
What's, so the plan is to have parking kind of in collegiate commons as well. Correct? It's not just the carbonate. Could,
Yeah.
just talk about that, correct?
So part of the thinking right now, and you see on the roadmap, some of the community engagement with dedicated stakeholders with these comments, exploring how could we structure a shared parking agreement with them to lower the burden on the particular Carbon Street and recognize that Collegiate Commons by any standards is overparked. So how do we share that? So I don't want to convey that we wouldn't put any parking here and we would only use Collegiate Commons, but I would be shocked if we don't end up with some sort of shared use agreement for a certain number of their spots.
Has there been communication with Urban Inc. about that idea yet?
I believe Mark's had some communication, but not concerted. So this would be the opportunity to start that.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's after this.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that comes down to, and then that would, if that fell through, that would dictate this design. You may not get 65 houses. You may only get 60 because you have to have parking. I mean, it would change the numbers, the layout, that kind of stuff. But what we're talking about tonight is proceeding with negotiations with Fading West for the development. Nothing more. That's all we're talking about. At this point, and that could fall through, just saying. It may come back to the trustees and you say, no, I don't like it. I want to see this and this and this, and it goes back again. I mean, it plain and simple. Nothing is etched in stone by proceeding tonight.
Right.
Nothing at all.
Well, it doesn't hurt to talk.
There you go.
Doesn't hurt to talk.
That's kind of where you're at. Then, once we get the detail, those details, then it comes to what Devin's talking about, parking, this and that. That's why we have those other meetings with the other people involved. And then that will dictate, maybe we don't get that many homes, or maybe we can do more, or maybe, those kind of things. Did you have anything, Dave, you want to throw in?
No.
Hey, everything sounds, you're just absorbing. I could tell, man. You're getting heavy.
Wheels are turning.
So from my perspective, I do not think it's gonna hurt to proceed with negotiations. Right now, we're not locked into anything. It's open air. Well, it won't hurt to talk.
No contracts have been signed at this point. Negotiating.
All right.
Any other questions, clarifications? Because I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to proceed with negotiations.
Thank you, Norm.
Second.
I'll second.
I had a second, Volpe. I'm sorry, Cindy. Further discussion?
Okay.
Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Fay.
Yes.
Trustee LaCretzi.
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg.
Yes.
Trustee Rowe.
Yes.
Trustee Swisher.
Yes.
Trustee Wilkie.
Yes.
Thank you all very much, and very good discussion. Very good discussion. Next item is the Stackhouse Annexation, 1575 County Road 306. Board will receive an update from staff regarding the petition for annexation from Stackhouse LLC, Alex Telhorst, owner for the property located 1570 County Road 306. And I'm going to, I'm just going to second guess. Who's got that one?
Back at me.
Yeah.
Good evening again, everyone. So I wanted the first words out of my mouth to be that this is the first of many conversations. It is a acknowledgement of receipt of an application. So I want to be clear from the start that we are not considering the merits of this annexation. We're not, hearing it. We're not even considering whether we should accept the annexation. This is simply an acknowledgement that an annexation petition has been received by the town. And I want to be able to outline what that annexation petition says in very high level terms, which properties it is, how it's structured, and then lay out a draft timeline for how the review could proceed for your acceptance and or modification. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, number one, right now, it's just to get this out in the public sphere. As you all know, this conversation started with a work session back in February of last year with Alex Telthorst. He presented a concept. You all talked about that and gave some direction to staff for more conversations with Alex over the summer. That has resulted in this formal petition. The second purpose tonight is to talk a little bit about, in layman's terms, obviously, if you have specific questions, Jeff is going to be the backup here. What this is in a flagpole annexation, why it's called a flagpole, what that means from a very high level perspective, and what that means as far as how the state statutes dictate the timeline of how we need to proceed and various benchmarks that we need to hit. And then finally, to try to get direction from you on that timeline so that we can meet the state statute requirements. So first and foremost, the subject property is shown on the right. It is about 7.8 acres, currently known as 15750 County Road 306. You all might be familiar with it. It has a blue single family residence towards the south end of that property right now. It's directly adjacent to the west of the West Winds subdivision, which is in the county. Because this property is not contiguous with municipal boundaries, it requires what's called a flagpole annexation. So that's that section on the left, which is a stretch of about, I'm bad at math, 3/5 of a mile of 306. The right-hand portion of which is contiguous with municipal boundaries. So this flagpole annexation procedures require that we consider the annexation of that flagpole first, thereby making the subject property adjacent to municipal boundaries, which would be that county. Then we can consider the annexation of the subject property. In reality, those are considered very much together and done in sequence, sort of in the same process. But that process is called a flagpole annexation. We will get much more in depth in all the details of this in future meetings. But there are a few basic process requirements that I wanted to cover tonight that inform the timeline that we've put together. The first is this meeting right now, which is a formal acknowledgement of the receipt of the petition to you all, informing you that that petition has been submitted. The second formal action is where you consider in a public meeting whether or not to accept this petition. And in that meeting, we will dive into the details of what they're proposing. We will make sure that it meets the eligibility criteria as set forth in the statutes. We will discuss the annexation agreement, the master plan, all those various pieces. So that would happen in that acceptance hearing, and you all would say, yes, this is a complete petition and it is eligible. And therefore, we will accept the petition, or no, this is not eligible or not a complete petition, and therefore we reject the petition altogether. I'll cover number 3 in a moment. And then the final step in the annexation process is the actual formal annexation hearing, where you consider the merits of the annexation. Is it in the best interest of town? Do we want to actually approve with conditions, or deny the annexation altogether?
Question okay, so I'm seeing 90 days. Okay, and then we go to 60 days.
Yes.
So within 60 days of the acceptance of the resolution to approve the annexation?
To accept the petition. So Phil, if you go to the next slide. So you have this handout in front of you just because the writing on the screen is a bit small. Put together this timeline and worked with Jeff and Catherine to verify it, but Jeff, please correct any misstatements I make. Essentially, there is this sort of paradox in the timeline where once you all hold that meeting to accept the petition, the hearing to consider and approve or deny the annexation has to be held within 60 days. So that meeting to accept the petition starts the clock, so to speak.
Okay.
However, because this is a flagpole annexation, the landowners that are adjacent and abutting the flagpole itself are required to receive notice of this petition 90 days prior to that.
Okay.
So this is part of why we're with you tonight and presenting this timeline tonight. Because if this timeline is acceptable to you all, tomorrow is that date, we will send out that special notice to those landowners.
To those landowners.
Correct.
Okay.
February 22nd is the date that we're proposing that you all would consider accepting the petition.
That's what I didn't understand there when I saw that. I go, how can you do that before, chicken before the egg?
And so then if you all accept that petition on February 22nd, the hearing would then be set for April 12th.
Right.
And this whole timeline is put together in the context of making sure that you all as a board would be able to fully consider and decide on this annexation.
And the reason it's only the flagpole area is because those are people that are adjacent to, right? The south side is already adjacent to Town of Buena Vista property.
Well, so, and Jeff, maybe you can help a little bit here, but I included the special notice letter in your packets. The other element of that special notice is offering the opportunity to those abutting landowners to join the petition.
And that would be the abutting landowners of the flagpole on the north side.
On both sides.
Both sides, because the south side, not all of them are, okay, got you.
2 parcels.
Oh, 2 parcels. Oh, I remember that. Yeah, okay.
Jeff, do you want to expand on any of that?
I think you've covered it pretty well. I mean, it's definitely a bit of a confusing process, which is made more confusing by the flagpole aspect of it. But I sort of break down annexations in sort of 2 simple steps that the board is basically involved with. The first one is making sure the petition is in substantial compliance with the petition requirements. That's just the petition itself. Then for a flagpole, you got to make sure the owners have the same opportunity that the actual property that's proposed to be annexed. They have the same opportunity to annex under the same terms and conditions. That's where the notice gets confusing. So all those abutting property owners get notice. And then the final hearing is basically for you to decide whether or not to actually annex. And then there's you have to basically meet some statutory requirements, but it's still a discretionary act on your part, whether or not to annex the property at the end of it all.
And the adjacent property owners, if they decide to join the annexation, then they would be under the same requirements as.
They would be under the same
requirements as Alex would be in that respect. They would have to meet the water cash and lieu and things like that. Am I correct?
That is correct. And in all the other terms and conditions as well. And so it's pretty difficult for, in most cases for abutting landowners to come in under the same requirements as the actual property itself.
Okay. And then the other note I'll just make, as you can see on the timeline, is that while it is allowable and not required to combine the zoning aspect with the annexation aspect, we are proposing that we run those processes simultaneously. And what I mean by that is that under state statute, you can choose, as Jeff mentioned, to discretionarily say yes or no, we want to annex this property. Then you could separately say, what do we want to zone this property? And you have, I think it's 90 days after you annex to zone a property, maybe it's 120 days, I can't remember. But the opportunity is before us, and in this context, staff feels it's most appropriate to consider the zoning that is being requested together with the annexation, because they are so tied together. So in this timeline, you'll see that there are actually 2 public hearings in this process. One is with Planning and Zoning Commission on March 16th to consider the zoning request, which is R3. And then the second public hearing would be the actual annexation and zoning hearing. So on April 12th, you all would be not only considering whether to annex, But in that meeting, if you choose to annex, you would also be considering and improving the zone.
We followed the similar process
The
with
same-
Sangre de Cristo. Yep, electric.
It was a flagpole and we had to, when that came to the vote of the board, this one first, then this one, and then that encompassed the other.
Correct, and the zoning, and then the zoning. Mhm.
I remember that distinctly. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
But it's just because I'm still learning, I guess, about the annex process. So why do they want to, why do they want to do this? I mean, maybe that's a question for them, but I assume what's the purpose of them asking to be annexed into town?
So I can give a very high level, and this is something that we will explore much further throughout this process. Alex Telthorst, as he described in his work session before, and I'll lean a little bit more on Philip and other trustee members that were involved, have a desire to build housing for the community. And that desire for workforce and long-term housing is one of the main drivers behind his focus on development. The path that led him to this particular property, I can't speak to. But his desire is to build a development that serves local workforce and community.
And to achieve that, he has to do a certain amount of density, and you can't do that in the county.
In the county.
The county zoning does not allow
Okay. And
the
he
type
wants
of density
in that spot. So he's.
anywhere
in the county.
Right, but he wants to develop there.
Yes.
It was actually proposed by another development group prior to him.
Correct.
And I think that's probably what sparked his idea and said, hey, that's not a bad idea.
Gotcha.
So now he's taken on running with it, but to do that, like you say, county only allows so many buildings per parcel, so many parcels per lot. So I mean, it's really cost prohibitive.
Sure.
And so by joining the town, obviously he gets several things out of the deal, which is town utilities, things like that, but he gets the opportunity to go higher density.
Gotcha.
And at that initial meeting, we talked some deed restriction, things like that, which there were some pretty, I mean, they laid some heavy stuff on him that I was surprised that he actually came back. I'm going, oh, wow, he's accepting some of those comments. So it's pretty cool. What he's doing, no different than, let's say, what we're doing on Carbonate. He's wanting to do some affordable housing, apartment type in certain areas and some houses, if I remember correctly. But it was going to be pretty high density.
Gotcha. This must have.
Part of what we talked about, wasn't it that we wanted to have some affordable AMI housing?
And there, if I remember correctly, he was, I think some of that was going to be on the northern end of that property is where those apartment type buildings were going to be, if I remember right. And then the actual housing structures were going to go back in towards the development that was already there. And it would make it more palatable to the neighbors.
Yeah.
That's just the way I remember it.
I think as long as that is still part of the plan, then I would be in support.
And of course, all we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I do want to say all we're doing right now is accepting the proposed timeline. That's all we're doing right now.
And we're not accepting the annexation yet.
Correct. Then, once the timeline's accepted, okay, the wheels start turning.
Right.
And they can turn pretty fast. Now, my question is, okay, we're talking this one. We're talking fading west. We're talking how is staff going to be able to grasp all of this and run with it? That's my question. How's that going to hit the plate?
I think we're lined up to do this. Yeah.
That's where I was coming from. I don't want to overwhelm staff.
I would not let this come before you.
I thought it was going to be that way. I mean, I appreciate that, but that's where I'm at. I'm going, wow, there's so much going on in town. I can't take that away. And obviously you have some good help now, so it really makes a difference too. But what we're discussing now is this timeline. We are not accepting an annexation agreement, not whatsoever. All we're accepting is this timeline. This is how it's going to fall. Once we make a decision tonight to accept the timeline, you see the first one there is January 12th. notification goes out to all the abutting people on that flagpole. And that's how it starts to play out.
And you saw that letter in your packet, which is exactly what will be sent, but the language in it says the timeline under consideration is XYZ. This is subject to change. So even that letter itself, just by sending it out, we're not committing ourselves without being able to change that timeline. But once we start February 22nd, that's really when the timeline starts in earnest.
Yeah, gotcha. Any other thoughts? Dave?
Question, the notification to the neighbors, the point is to allow them to opt in or oppose this? I mean, is there?
Well, so they have the option to opt in, and they will have up to 45 days prior to the April 12th hearing to file their own petition to join. Any resident of Buena Vista, and I guess for that matter, anyone able to come and make public comment could speak out in opposition to this if they would like to. So it's not an invitation to either support or join or oppose, but yes, that's their.
And if I read this correctly, notice of April 12th hearing for 5 consecutive weeks, starting by March 4th. I mean, there's planning and zoning hearings that people can attend. Then there's actually going to be hearings here that people can come in. And if I remember correctly, on the very first one, we did have some adjoining properties come in and object. And that wasn't this one, Alex. It was the previous ones that were going to, that it was going to inhibit their site view. So there's a lot of public comment goes into this.
Okay.
A lot of public comment.
Yeah, there's also potentially just the general opposition to it in terms of water.
Could be, yes, definitely. I mean, all this is timeline. Really is all this is.
And even the next conversation that we're talking about, we won't really be presenting for you all to chew on the merits of the annexation. We will only be presenting, does this annexation petition meet statutory requirements for a petition? And you all have the opportunity to say, yes, it does. And then at future meetings, we will dive into the merits of water, of housing, of public improvements, of densities, of all those things.
Need restrictions, that kind of stuff. That's when it's a process I've never sat through. Sangre didn't do this. Obviously, it's not, you can't even compare the same. This is totally different type of annexation, but yes, all of those things come into play. Actually, it'll be, it's kind of a good taste for town because this is small and big at the same time. Because it's going to test, it's just going to test your will, I guess is the best way to put it, to numbers, things like that. You're really going to have to digest big. So question on the table. Staff requests direction from the board on the proposed timeline. Should it be adopted? Staff will send out special notice of budding landowners, or if you just say, nah, don't care to, I guess you can do that too.
And I'll just put a little more color on that.
Oh, sorry.
If we do not pursue this particular timeline, I think the natural result will most likely be a few month delay in the start of that clock, because we wouldn't want to put you all in a position of hearing or accepting a petition for annexation that a future board then. And so we kind of thought about that as we put together the timeline and saying, if it's not this one, then it's probably a few months away. I don't even know if that's.
And I did see that going through the timelines. It's basically you're saying a board decision, a current board decision right now is what you're looking at. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
You'll make a motion to?
Yeah. I'll make a motion that we adopt this timeline as specified on page 122, which starts with letters going out tomorrow to owners abutting the flagpole.
Thank you. Second, Lucrezi. Further discussion? Cindy, do you have anything?
No, not at this time.
Already? Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Fang,
Yes.
Trustee Lucrezi,
Yes.
Trustee Nyberg,
Yeah.
is that a yeah or?
You rolled it a little.
Yes.
Accepting only the timeline.
Yes. Only the timeline.
Trustee Rowe,
Yes.
Trustee Swisher,
Yes.
Trustee Wilkie.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Only the timeline. Okay, next item, item D, reschedule March 22nd to the 29th. Consideration.
This, looking at the calendar, the March 22nd meeting falls on spring break week. And given all of the things we have going on, I think myself and maybe another or two staff members will be out that week of the 22nd. So there is a
called Zoom.
Yeah, no. No. I'll be on a boat somewhere.
It's not a cruise.
There's a 3-week break between the 22nd and the first meeting in April. So if we
Sure,
move it to
because
the 29th, then we're still.
Because the IGA was potentially scheduled for the 29th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
That was this one. That was, never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind. It was five, there's 5 Tuesdays.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
There's 5 Tuesdays in March. So
Any opposition? Okay, so Norm opposes it.
Where are we going?
Let's work for you, right? I would entertain a motion.
We move the meeting from March 22nd to March 20th.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
Second, Fay. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 I have an I suppose. Oh, okay, motion passes. I'm sorry. Trustee staff interaction. Start off with Shane. You still with us? There he is.
Still here?
Work.
I like to put the new guy on spot. Trustee staff interaction. What do you got? Anything?
I do not know.
Oh, like
off on the right foot. That's
right. Yeah, you're winning so far. So far, you're winning. That's great. Michelle.
I'm good.
Thank you, Michelle. And I did see your email on that information. Thank you.
Okay.
Michael, is Michael Hammond here? Is he still out there? Do you have
I'm
anything?
still
for me,
here
Michael?
and I'm awake and everything.
All right. You're not on a boat somewhere?
No, not today.
Oh, that's the
Not
boat
today.
you're going to be on. I got you. Okay. Got anything for us, Michael?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Volpe.
Yeah, another weird one. Sorry, guys. Well, I was reading the packet. It dawned on me that how excited we all get about the sales tax graph. But it's nothing we have knobs or dials or any discussion about how to manipulate. So I wonder the utility, I enjoy seeing it and it's a great measure of how our town is doing, but it's not anything that we're doing anything about. So it just struck me as odd that how much attention we pay to something that we have zero control, zero discussion, zero anything about. So.
Well, we could move my whole report to the consent
Thank you,
agenda
Michelle.
if you want.
No, I mean, the rest of it is stuff that we need to know about and the sales tax we need to know as well. It's just nothing we ever have a discussion about what we can do about it.
So your point.
My point is, we continually talk about stuff that we don't spend a lot of time on it, but hopefully Michelle doesn't spend a lot of time formulating that either. It's just something that we pay attention to that we don't really need to pay attention to.
Thanks, Dave. Matter of opinion. Devin.
I have a couple things. I was curious about whether is there a possibility or even has there ever been a update from Urban Inc. or on Collegiate Commons or even just an update on anything about it? it was finished and then we hear anything? Good, is it bad? We just hear rumors, I don't know. So that's just,
Guess I don't think we've heard anything formal in terms of a report from Urban Inc. No. Could we request that? Sure.
yeah, because eventually it will be ours, correct?
No, the town owns the ground and the parking lot. Urban Inc. owns the building and it's a 75-year ground lease, something like that.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly.
10, 20 years there, but way beyond our lifetime ground lease with them. And then the town has the option at that point to, I think even at some point, a first right of refusal kind of thing to purchase it if the town was interested in that.
Oh, okay, right.
But there's no, in that agreement, there's no detail about restricting that price or it's going to be a market value.
Yeah, I'd be curious to have some kind of update on that, whether it's just like a short little thing from town staff or to know anything from them, just because that was like the biggest project we ever did or something. At when we did that, and I just look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, we did that. What's going on? So
we have heard from, especially early on, but we did hear from the management staff, the staff that was hired to approve applicants and then groundskeeping. So we have heard from them from time to time, but we could request some kind of update and bring it to you all.
I'd be interested in that. The other thing I was curious about is if there's any update on housing and pricing, whether our short-term rental cap has done anything. I've heard rumors to the grapevine that lots aren't selling as fast as they were in the summer at such high prices, but I don't know if anyone else has heard anything, or did we fix it?
Can you send us on a grant to mine that data? Wasn't Chiefy Housing Authority applying for a grant and we issued a letter of support? Maybe I'm not remembering that part right, but there was a grant.
Yeah. So you're kind of stealing my thunder here. I was going to give an update on that.
Yeah.
But
Actually, if Devin's done, he can just.
Good.
No, yeah, so the grant you're referring to is the 1271 Housing Affordability Planning Grant from DOLA. That's the same grant that we applied to and were granted. But the housing authority under the county is also pursuing that particular grant to update the housing needs assessment. And that part of that scope is also looking at the intersection of non-primary occupied homes on the market. So that would be short-term rentals, second homes, other sort of vacation, that sort of thing on the market. So it won't probably try to cause or tie a causal link between the short-term rental ordinance that you all passed and our housing prices.
Right.
Probably won't go that detailed, but it will be looking at our overall housing needs and diving far more deeply into what do we need as a community in what striations of unit types and AMIs. So that would be really positive. That I believe they're shooting to have that updated needs assessment out in the summer.
Yeah, that'd be super interesting to get that data. I've been looking, in my spare time. I remembered in college, like 12 years ago, we learned a lot about a housing trust in our community where I lived in Burlington, Vermont, and I Googled it and I looked it up, and they still have the exact same program that I remember, which is a shared equity home ownership. And it was super interesting to just read their little easy blurb about it. But basically what that talks about is having the housing trust own the land and then be able to pay the down payment for people, but they have to live on the land, and and it gives us significant less housing price for people. So, town owns a lot of land. So that would be interesting if at some point we could look into ways to using that to help with housing and or purchasing houses or whatnot to help people own a house in this town. Because someday maybe I'll own a house, but I don't know. So I don't know, it's just things I've been thinking about. And I really want to thank staff, Chief Morgan and Investigator Lee and Vista. That was a super great presentation on mental health and what we're doing. It's something I've been rattling in my brain how to talk about here. And it's great to see things that are moving forward. And I look forward to hearing updates on that, and anything we can do to support that would be awesome. So I'm done.
Thank you, Devin. And I think your question is are we getting close on the cap on short-term rentals? I mean, obviously the last report we had was Paula saying at 8 o'clock in the morning, there was a line down the street or whatever. And, we did stuff. Not saying, gosh, it's January. It's like, what has changed? The housing market changed. Not because of short-term rental, the housing market changed.
There were still licenses left over.
There are still licenses left over. There's still seven licenses for out of county home buyers, 36 for in-county non-primary homeowners. And of course, South Main, there's no limit. And then if it's your primary house, and I can tell you every day somebody calls and asks about a licensing process and if the license is available.
It's it. The impact I think is negligible on the sales of what's going on sales wise. Sales just said it just hit that peak back here. And then now it's like, oh, okay, well, COVID's, maybe I'll stay home and not move, or, I don't know how to put it, but I know I saw the market die. It just like, it's still selling. Don't get me wrong. People are still selling, but it's not like it was. So anyway, do you have anything else?
Just on our housing affordability grant, we have concluded the RFP process on selecting a consultant. So if you all remember, we're looking for a consultant to help us essentially do a code audit as well as look at our other development review processes and procedures and explore, find, identify levers that we might be able to craft and or start pulling to incentivize or require housing affordability in our planning and zoning department and approach. So we are narrowing in. We interviewed 3 out of the 4 consultants that proposed, and we're looking at making a decision the later part of this week. So you all will interact a little bit with that consultant and hear from them on findings and input on what you see, but we'll also be working with the Planning and Zoning Commission and doing some communication with builders and developers and other property owners as well. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Gina.
The only thing I really have is just essentially it was really nice to go to the school board meeting last night and just kind of listen in and learn a little bit. I was somewhat blown away about the wait list for the 79, I guess, preschoolers and such. Is just a constant reminder, obviously, that thing like we're going to focus on with the carbonite streets with hopefully having that space. I mean, that probably doesn't even scratch the surface as to what we really need, but at least it's something. But and just learning also about the different pieces of property that both areas have, and I don't know, just fun things to think about maybe for the future and opportunities, and seeing that there seems to be a nice that there's an openness to maybe working together on some projects. I thought was just a good thing or a good sign. So, but that was really about it. So, yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Well, before Chief Morgan left, I wanted to give one of his officers a attaboy. I had a phone call over the weekend. There's an elderly lady in town that was they were trying to scam her. And Eli went over and was there and actually talked to the guy because the guy called while he was there. And it was impressive that once I got the phone call, I called him and he went right over there and took care of things. So hopefully we'll put a kibosh on that. And the other thing too is the presentation they put on about the wellness. Years ago, when I was on the road, we had a serious situation. Called it a debriefing. Just a bunch of us got together and talked about our feelings of what happened. And, you know, at one time I had a nasty suicide because of somebody I knew, and I broke down in tears. And that is a very hard situation to go through, and there is a lot of PTSD out there because of that. And with the way things are this day and age, that's got to be one of the beneficial things that we can do for them, because been there, done that, and it's hard. It's really hard
The
to,
stress is immeasurable.
it is hard. So that's one thing that they've really opened their eyes to, and is well worth the information gathering that they're getting and the tasks that they're doing, because it's out there.
Thank you, Norman. Devin, I know, thank you too. And the thing I think that's key to me is it has to be easily available.
Right.
Because the stress of trying to find time is stress in itself. If they don't make it mandatory, just like you, we got together and we had this talk. And I'm not saying mandatory, it's available. And that's what has to be done. It has to be available, because it's so easy to, just like she, and sooner or later the bells fall.
It's a very hard situation to be in, to go through, and if it helps out there, seek it out.
And agree with Devin, and I think everybody agrees, if there's a way we can assist, we need to assist.
Yeah.
100%.
Benefits and also time as well.
Yep. And, you know, Michelle, and basically reiterate, we are doing that as a town, but if we can do more, let's do more.
Right.
And I think that's what everybody's saying. If there's more needed.
I think not only like, saying that those things, but also encouraging it and, making sure that the culture is an open thing, not just to the police, but also to staff as well, to make sure they're taking care of themselves, mentally as well as physically, because,
At any
burnouts is anything else.
time, anybody could be put in a situation.
Anytime.
Anybody.
And like I say, we've had it on staff before. And staff gets close. They're your best buddy. Something happens, you go.
You just can't go out.
Yesterday, I was talking to him.
You can't go out and just have a beer and talk about it.
Yeah.
That don't cut it.
Anything else, Norm?
No.
Appreciate it. Cindy?
A little response to Dave. I like getting the sales tax figure. If it changes drastically, it affects the budget that we created. I know we have no control of it, but we still need to try and pay attention to it a little bit. If it doesn't, and then, and that was only a little blurb on that. There was talk about raising the trustee and the mayor amount for the new incoming trustees. with the amount of time that we spend doing this, I'm not opposed to giving those people a small raise. If anyone else is interested in doing that for them.
It's an agenda item next meeting, isn't it?
We put it on the draft agenda for next meeting.
Oh, okay.
I did compile some data and shared it with the mayor. And I was gonna defer to you when you would like to see that on an agenda.
You know, that'll work for me. And I would say, let's get that data out to everybody because it's very informative.
Okay.
Very informative.
Okay.
So, wow. Oh,
When's the cutoff for people that are running?
January 24th. Petitions have to be. Is that?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, cool.
okay, thank you, Cindy. Anything else?
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Those new glasses?
No, I dug out my old ones.
Well, they're in style again. Just saying.
Okay.
Libby.
Well, it's just about tax filing time. So, the town of Buena Vista gives us the, room over there, the Pinion Room. Is that one? Yeah. So, we'll be doing taxes, I think, on Thursday afternoons. We're not gonna do Tuesdays and Thursdays, but, and it could be for anybody. So if any of the town staff want to come, we'll probably get going in about a month, I think, probably around February 11th.
Okay, is that all you got?
It's free,
It's free.
electronic filing.
Oh, I don't think it'll work for me.
There's no
If anybody knows anybody who wants to help, that would be fine too.
And no, you don't want
recommendation.
I'm like,
I luckily got my checkbook reconciled. Yes. I didn't cheat just by $30. That was it. Paula.
I'm just going to tag team on delivery. Yes, I'm already getting phone calls wanting to know when taxes are going to start. Other than that, several petitions are out for trustee and mayor, and they are due, like it just, Kevin's question, the 24th. January.
Thank you very much. Jeff, do you have anything you want to enlighten us with?
No, I think you got a little bit of a few things going on this year, so we'll be busy. Looking forward to helping you out.
We didn't figure you were making enough. We figured we'd give you a bump.
Oh, you know, I'm fine. You know, I'm happy to do all the work you want. I'm happy to not happy when things are quiet too. So
it all works. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know, it doesn't get said enough, but obviously with the election coming up and everything like that, I just want to say we have an amazing staff. And I can't imagine. That's all I can say. Because there's so much going on. And it's got to keep moving forward. That's all I can say. It's got to keep moving forward. A lot of big things. You'll kind of give us updates on these meetings, work sessions coming up. Paula will probably send us out some reminder emails, some that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
One of them said something about food and I'm saying yes.
Water work session, food.
Food.
Okay.
Nothing else. I had something else, but I totally forgot it. So that being said, we're going to go with, I'll entertain a motion.
You forgot Michelle.
I think I did Michelle.
Did you?
Didn't I do Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
I marked her off.
You did forget me. That's okay. Joseph,
Darn on my.
the only.
I pointed that way.
Oh, you already did. You forgot only me. That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Any thoughts around the board strategic planning advance, as we'll call it, in March?
You had that for the 12th.
Senator Christo.
Oh, yeah, and the Sangre de Cristo.
February 1, February 8th work session, and then March 12th, strategic planning.
Which is a Saturday.
Any questions, comments, objections to those dates? February 1st, Sangre de Cristo?
fine.
It's a That will, just so you know, that will be an executive session structured that way. It'll be noticed and everything, but
And what time was that one?
we're looking at 6 p.m.
They retired.
Got you, 6 p.m. Okay, that's the first Tuesday.
Mhm.
Not gonna be here.
Yeah, I'm not going to be here.
Probably Sangre de Cristos.
It's Sangre. In their meeting room.
Meeting room.
I'm good with it. If everybody else, no squawking.
Okay.
Okay. Next one was March 12th is actually the next one we want to discuss. That's a Saturday.
Mhm.
How does that look for everybody?
Saturday works good for me.
Okay.
Gonna be at the airport again?
We could do it wherever you all want to. We actually might have a new setup at the airport conference room
By then,
a little bit, so we could go out there.
leave that optional and continental breakfast type things.
Yeah, we'll have some.
Stuff like that, and then maybe a lunch if we're gonna go that far. The thing that's nice about Saturday is you are not pressed to get it done. In other words, you're not going, dang, it's 10 o'clock. Yeah, it's noon and the beers are coming. I mean, they're all okay.
Buy some planes.
Jeff didn't even smile. He's not listening at all.
I'm paying attention.
Okay, so I think those dates sound good.
Okay.
I'm not hearing any objections.
Plan on it.
Strategic planning, we don't have any staff at that one.
Typically, no. Typically, it's myself and we'll have a couple of staff, but that's.
Now I know we've had DOLA in the past.
Mhm.
Do we want to invite? Yeah.
We can involve DOLA. Joseph and I are probably gonna create some kind of facilitating plan.
Okay.
But I think DOLA's always offered to participate. We've had CML do it before during COVID, which was challenging, but or early on in COVID. And then CIRSA has some resources, but I don't know about on-site resources.
I'm trying to think of the advantage to the applicants.
I was gonna say, are we talking strategic planning or new trustee orientation?
It's both.
Okay,
It is both. So I would say if it's both tied together, maybe DOLA, that will highlight basically responsibilities or acceptable actions, if you want to put it that way.
Clarification, it's not a board orientation for new people. It's a chance for candidates to listen in, participate, and hear the process.
For the process. So maybe not DOLA, you think? And then if we want to have an orientation, we can always do something like that.
Mhm.
After the fact. Do they have like webinars on maybe a pre-recorded webinar or something that could be, everybody get together and new trustees can.
We could definitely do that after the election.
After the election. I think that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So
What day is
the
the
procedures,
election?
processes.
April 5th.
Yes.
So sounds good. I think we have a plan.
Okay.
Have a plan. Any other thoughts? Okay,
Great.
now maybe we can try a motion. Thank you, Norm. Second, row. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Everybody have a good night. Thank you very much. Take care, Jeff.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Thanks, Amy.
Night, everybody.